Teresa Amabile's book, Creativity in Context, is one of the very few texts that I can say definitively changed my thinking and approach to musical composition, despite being a book that is not directly on musical composition itself. Reading it was a personal paradigm shifting moment where I started to understand what music composition and my own wider studying of music meant to me, or at least what I wanted it to become, where before it was uncertain and ambiguous. In this article, therefore, I will attempt to unpack some of the core concepts from the book Creativity in Context and discuss why I found them significant. The first half will do the unpacking. Briefly, it will offer an overview of Amabile's underlying thesis and what is meant by a componential theory which she presents. I'll then give some brief definitions of the components and discuss how they come together to form a reduction of the creative process. In the second half, I will attempt to articulate why I found her theories so meaningful to my approach to music composition. Without unpacking the entire history, study and discourse of creativity, which I would not be qualified to do anyway, there is a clear link between Amabile's componential theory of creativity, that is to say it is made up of units, components or parts, and a very early theory on creativity known as staged theory. An early 20th century thesis by Graham Wallace, the staged theory of creativity essentially breaks down the creative process into 4 phases, which I'll try and explain briefly here. The first phase is preparation, which is the gathering of information about and for the problem to be solved, as well as sort of defining what the problem is. The second phase is incubation, which is the gestation or the moving of the problem to the subconscious, where you let it mull over a period of time based on, I suppose, the problem you've defined in the preparation phase and the research you've sort of fed your mind, I guess. The third phase is illumination, which is the light bulb moment, which sees your subconscious sort of hand back over its ideas, its possible solutions to the problem. And the fourth and final phase is verification or validation, which is the act of exploring and testing the solution to see if it's suitable. Amabile's componential theory, as we'll see, runs alongside a critiqued, adapted version of the staged theory that we've briefly mentioned. Furthermore, her componential approach explains what is happening at each stage and how the individual and their working environment influences their creativity. In doing so, Amabile, rightly in my opinion, emphasises the iterative nature of most creative tasks. In other words, the gradual step-by-step approach to reaching a creative solution, as opposed to a sudden burst of inspiration that solves the entire problem. In addition to this, Amabile's stage reduction of the creative process focuses on the conscious, the observable, active working part that is involved in being creative. What I mean by this is that her work is grounded empirically in the observation of people working on creative tasks. She did a load of studies observing groups of people in controlled environments trying to complete certain creative, artistic jobs and tasks. As a result, her phases focus on actively working toward a goal, where Wallace's defined different phases of, conscious and subconscious working on a creative problem. On screen, there is a diagram of a model taken from Creativity in Context. It demonstrates what we have just been discussing regarding Amabile's componential theory of creativity. Note how along the top we have what could be seen as Amabile's stages of the creative process, and below this the components of her theory. It also demonstrates other connections far more concisely than I could and won't attempt to do here. Before discussing the significance of Amabile's thesis and concepts, the 4 components of Amabile's theory are social environment, task motivation, domain relevant skills, and creative relevant processes. I'm going to try and, obviously, as I say, define these briefly as I can here. And obviously it's worth mulling them over, these descriptions, in line with the model that I previously showed. Domain relevant skills are an individual's knowledge base, experience and practice within the field or fields that a creative problem presents itself. An individual develops their knowledge base through study and may do so in direct preparation for a creative task. They draw possible solutions to their creative problem from this knowledge base and use these relevant skills to determine the value and validity of their potential solutions, deciding ideally upon the most appropriate and valuable one at the end. Linking to my previous article and video on overcoming writer's block, it could be seen as playing a valuable role in understanding and defining the conceptual space within which you are working. In other words, you require prior knowledge in your field to understand it and determine that creative responses are aesthetically commensurate with that space. Forming a conceptual framework, therefore, with your knowledge allows for a more confident verification process. Creative relevant processes are an individual's innate cognitive style and personality characteristics. In other words, how we consider and understand problems are vital to our response generation. How I think is different to how you think, although we might have, similarities in some areas and possibly vast differences in others. For example, using some of the terminology that Amabile puts forward, but not all of it, I might be more inclined to think laterally and synthesize ideas from different domains to come up with a new solution. However, you might have a greater tolerance for ambiguity. There are many subtleties to how each of us deals with whole or facets of creative problems. It is these individual inherent subtleties that this component encompasses. Task motivation is our desire to work on a problem. How that desire emerges is critical in positively or negatively impacting our creative potential. If the desire is innate, our willingness and want to work on the project will be greater, which will, have significant positive ramifications on our work. Whereas if the desire is not there, but something or someone is making us work on a creative task, forcing us to do it, then the impact could be detrimental. In essence, we do our best work when it doesn't feel like work or a task at all, and that task or work happens to give us meaning and a sense of pleasure and purpose. The social environment is the context within which an individual or group are working and how this affects creativity. For example, highly critical superiors or the imposition of deadlines hurts creativity, whereas working environments that encourage a degree of risk-taking, obviously in a creative sense, not a health and safety thing, and you allow greater creative autonomy, you usually see, creative people flourish. I guess I had two important revelations when, reading Amabile's work, which altered my understanding and approach to musical composition. I want to briefly discuss these discoveries here. The first is that creativity is a process of iterative learning and development, both in of itself and across multiple creative tasks. Secondly, creativity is not just something that we do in our heads, but in a location, possibly with other people, certain tools, and over a period of time. We can see creativity as iterative learning and development in Amabile's model to demonstrate her theory. In the interconnection between preparation as a phase in the creative process and domain-relevant skills as part of an individual's creative potential, there is a clear feedback loop. In preparing to meet the creative challenge, we practice and study building our knowledge and expertise. To put it another way, the process of composition is a process of learning and discovery. We discover new ways of ordering and articulating musical ideas, and possibly even our working processes, each time we attempt to go through that activity. If we consider the whole creative process as a representation of music composition, we can begin to identify a circular, repetitive quality. In a music project, we may study and then attempt to create ideas based on that practice. However, we may fall short of composing the piece that we want or need to. Therefore, we have to repeat the process, hoping that we get closer each time. Amabile's fifth stage, along the top of that previous model outcome, demonstrates this. Essentially, we iterate toward our goal. We study, ideate, verify, then repeat, or study, put study into practice, verify, and repeat. On a larger scale, in achieving our goal, or at least attempting to, our expertise is grown. Some of this knowledge might fall away, but some will stay, and some will remain useful in future projects as well. That'll differ projects to project. The relevance of the experience may vary too. In future compositions, some skills will be directly useful, some laterally, and some not at all. However, the process repeats, and we learn each time we compose, as I've said. Iteratively, in a project, we improve ourselves to rise to a challenge. Iteratively, project by project, our expertise is grown. It is easy to forget or not be aware of the fact that we have to create somewhere. In Amabile's model, she identifies how the social environment impacts a person's creative potential, although I would actually extend this to just environment in general, the things we surround ourselves with to do certain tasks, usually influencing task motivation, which has a substantial knock-on effect. Our working environment can considerably determine how effectively we work towards a creative solution. We should be mindful, therefore, of how our creative environment influences our work. For me, understanding how your creative environment impacts motivation makes me think about what I need at a given phase of the process of writing some music, what I want to achieve at each part. For example, do I need a feedback mechanism to create my music? If so, will my trumpet, piano, or sampled instrument or instruments help or hinder me? Could the shorter feedback mechanism that those things offer help motivate me or lead to my motivational and thus creative demise? Sometimes I find it helpful to imagine or develop an idea more fully before trying to verify it by playing it out or putting it into some software to play back. Therefore, being in an environment where I cannot, access a feedback mechanism, sort of avoiding that temptation, could be a motivating aspect of that environment and thus helpful to my creative endeavours. Alternatively, maybe I need to study or practice, to build up those skills, as we've said, to complete a task so I can begin to ideate more effectively. In this case, setting up a location free of distraction, sort of study environment where I can only analyse a score or read something or whatever with absolute focus would be more beneficial. Environments need to obviously play to what we're trying to achieve. Music composition is multifaceted and not all environments are equal. Furthermore, some are more specialised than others in ways that are not always obvious. So often we can set up a space that we hope can serve all parts of our creative process. However, this, in my opinion, leads to a master of none situation. One environment might help us define, practice or ideate, while another might help us verify our work, whereas one that tries to do all of those things might not do particular ones very well. It's context dependent. Hopefully my efforts to discuss this book have proven insightful, and my efforts to articulate its personal significance has added to the commentary. I present obviously a whistle-stop tour of Amabile's concepts and Thesis, so obviously if you're interested, go and read up on them and don't base a critique on her work through my commentary. Go and grab a copy. If you're interested in knowing more, I've put some links to the book as well and a couple of others in the description below. I consider the study of creativity to be one of the most valuable efforts I've made over the past 6 years to better myself as a composer. Having a better understanding of the mechanics of creativity means I can, when I need to be more mindful of what I am doing. While this is ironically a negative state, a creative state, as I've exited that free-flowing state of play, does give me an idea or methodology for trying to work back to that playful state. For example, I might need a break to feed my mind or body, or I might need to change my workspace, my environment. The answer is obviously not always clear, but it allows me to be persistent.